Hello to everybody, and welcome once again to the Climate and Clean Air Coalition's hosted West African virtual workshop. I hope everybody can hear me now. Thank you for participating in today's workshop on advancing climate action in agriculture and food systems. This is being organized within the context of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition's agriculture initiative that has been prioritizing on really enhance the ambition of 2030 NDCs by including actions to reduce short-lived climate pollutants from the agriculture sector. This is also part of our effort to create a group of leaders on the ground that can really help show the way forward and show some actionable solutions on the ground that can be taken by countries. I'd like to give you some technical tips before we begin. This is how to use WebEx. If you're experiencing any sound issues, please conduct a sound check. You can do that by pressing on the black circle with the 3 points to test your speaker and microphone, and to also adjust the input level. At the end of the session, we will also have a question and answer session. So you will see that you will have also a question and answer box where in picture 1, you can see that you can direct your questions to all the panelists, to the host, presenter, or to a specific panelist. So we look forward to your questions and to providing feedback to that. So we're very pleased now to begin the session with an introduction by our facilitator and key strategic partner representing CGIAR CCAFs, the CGIAR research program on climate change, agriculture, and food security, represented by Linny Wallenberg.
Thank you, Catalina, and welcome everyone. As Catalina mentioned, the objective of the workshop is to raise awareness on what we can really do to advance climate action in the agriculture and food system sector. To that end, we'll be talking about, our panelists will be talking about NDC enhancement, country experiences, drawing on 3 countries in particular, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, and other actions that can support countries in the region. The context in West Africa is that emissions are moderate, but still significant. So in 2017, we had about 226 million tons of CO2 equivalents of emissions in that year. And that was about 24% of Africa's total agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. It is also about 4% of global agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. And to put that in context, that's about twice the level of aviation emissions globally. And the region is second after East Africa in terms of highest emissions in the continent. Agriculture contributes about 1/4 of overall emissions in the region in West Africa. And the highest contributors are livestock, rice, and open burning, which align well with the mission of the CCAC and the interest in short-lived climate pollutants. The big challenge is, though, of course, food security and the projection that by 2050, Africa's population and West Africa's population are expected to nearly double. And Nigeria is going to be, by all scenarios, the 3rd largest country in the world with about 700 million people. So how to achieve food security and reduce emissions. Next slide, please. Fortunately, the nationally determined contributions for the UNFCCC do highlight the role of agriculture in mitigation, with most countries in West Africa including an agricultural mitigation target, either explicitly or as part of an economy-wide target, with the exception of just 2 countries, Guinea-Bissau and Liberia. The African Development Bank noted from a review of the NDCs that in order to implement the NDCs, external finance, technology, and capacity building will be necessary. Next slide, please. If one looks a bit in more detail at the NDCs, you can see that the top sectors of interest, again, to the CCAC are there. So livestock and the methane emissions from livestock, 6 countries include livestock in their NDCs. And then for rice, we have an additional 6 countries. And you can see in this list that there are a host of other measures that also, of course, been included. Next slide, please. And so for this session today, we have 3 segments. In the first segment of about half an hour, we have 3 speakers who will talk about NDCs and agriculture. In the second segment, we will look at country experiences more specifically for about an hour with 7 speakers. And in the final segment, we'll hear from some global actors about what can be done to improve implementation. And then we'll have a period, we'll save all of our questions for the end for about 30 minutes. So it is my pleasure to introduce the first panel, and we'll start with Martial Vernou. Thank you. So Martial is the Natural Resources Officer for Climate Change Mitigation at FAO, and I'll turn over to Martial. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. So, I will give you a snapshot of what is Climate and Clean Air Coalition and the work on agriculture in that coalition. So I will just start to say that the Climate and Clean Air Coalition is a voluntary partnership of government, UN and intergovernmental organizations, businesses, scientific institutions, and civil society organizations, committed all together to improving air quality and protecting the climate through action to reduce short-lived climate pollutants. Today, the global network includes 120 state and non-state partners, but also very, very important hundreds of local actors that are carrying out activities across all economic sectors on the ground of the different countries. Now, moving on that side, you can see on the agriculture initiative, that initiative supports countries specifically to identify and increasingly ambition in action policies and also targeting all the different food systems. So not only the production angle, all the food system. And it's guided by a priority to enhance food security, as Lini was mentioning, and livelihood. We demonstrate solutions to reduce the short-lived climate pollutant that deliver quick benefit for the climate and air quality altogether. On agriculture, you can see is a very relevant sector for the coalition. So here are some more statistics. 24% of all greenhouse gas are from agriculture and forestry overall, including land use change. But if we look specifically on methane and black carbon, it's more or less 40%, a little bit less than half of all global anthropogenic emissions. So that sector is really important for that. And here you have the 5 main areas where the coalition is focusing, where the agriculture initiative is focusing: reducing methane from livestock, including manure and the enteric fermentation, from paddy rice production, so again methane, also reducing black carbon from open burning, and we are just recently new area of work on integrated strategy for reducing methane together with black carbon from crop residues from bioenergy. Next slide, please. Okay. So here you have the major aim of the agriculture initiative is really to catalyze the practice and policy changes that are needed now. So really the initiative is a catalyzer. And this is really important, even more today with the pandemic situation, where we need really to build back better the new economy of all countries, including on agriculture. And then after the initiative passed, I would say the mantle onto organizations such like, but not exclusively, FAO and the World Bank, with a mandate to expand and scale up this work. And here you can see the 4 pillars. I will not read, but the 4 pillars basically is building political will, assisting countries with tools on capacity building, supporting coalition on enabling environment, and assembling evidence that enable large-scale financing. So the scaling up aspect is also very, very important. Next slide. So I will move to more concrete example. As a whole, working together, for instance, with FAO, so I am from FAO, but working with other partners like New Zealand, through the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Center or the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gas, on the World Bank, on UNGEF, on other partners like CCAC, for instance. The coalition is underscoring the mitigation potential of enteric methane and promoting cost-effective solutions. This work, for instance, has been done on beef production in South America, Argentina, Uruguay, and here you can see on dairy production system. So it has been done in East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, in South Asia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And here you have an example that focuses on West Africa, focusing on 5 countries, Benin, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Mali, and Niger. And here you have 2 graphs that are extracted from that publication that is in French, where most of this is the language most common of the 5 countries here, that show that on top you can see reference on intervention, so that the publication look at references for both pastoral on top, in the middle on agro-pastoral production system, and you can see, look at the yellow arrow, the potential of reduction that can be implemented in the different countries in both pastoral and agro-pastoral production. So it's just an example. Please read the full publication. You have the link below if you want to learn more. But it's to show that a real potential to be implemented and scaled up straightforwardly. Slide. So also concerning West African region, there is a solution center that provides small-scale funding for a specific goal. So here it can be helping government in general of developing country to achieve a real outcome, such as a policy or other action that can lead to real concrete emission reduction. So here you have Nigeria that is a partner since 2012. And here to scale up accelerated short-lived climate pollution reduction, the country prepared a national action plan where emission abatement strategy in the agriculture sector are a key focus. In panel 3, we will hear more about this project from Jessica McCarthy, so I will not enter into detail here, but just for you an example of what the initiative did in that region. Just to add, also on the previous slide, black carbon from burning has also been cited by IPCC as a source of rain disturbance on patterns over all West Africa. So it's really important to have action engaged in that region. Another illustration you have now here concerning enhanced coordination at national level. So agriculture institutional strengthening coordination is also being supported in Nigeria and also in Vietnam, but you can see also here, to sustainably increase the level of action taken in each country to reduce SLCP, so the short-lived climate pollutant, from the agriculture sector, by further promoting coordination and scaling up activities at the national level. So coordination among all different ministries is really key to achieve concretely a goal. So this will be achieved by increasing general awareness regarding the pollutant on the action taken, increasing national awareness also on the specific impact of it on mitigation potential of the measure, specifically in the agriculture sector, mobilizing interministerial collaboration and commitment to enhancing agriculture short-lived climate pollutant mitigation in NDC, and I will go back to that later on assessing new and sustainable financing to implement agriculture reduction program related to short-lived climate pollutant and to scale or this at a region or national level. Next slide, please. Okay, I guess the next slide was just yeah, it's a thank you, but just also to add that here I have the hat of FAO as a really supportive and a member of the initiative under the coalition, but it was when I was mentioning the need for coordination. So FAO, we are also supporting countries on their NDC with a lot of different actors and partners that are also engaged with the coalition, for instance, the NDC partnership, and all the members of the NDC partnership. And this is certainly the way to move forward, even more in a time where we really need to tackle all different, let's say, challenges in front of us in an holistic way. So thank you so much. I'm open to answer any questions.
Thank you, Martial. If you don't mind, for the attendees, we'll hold our questions until the end, but do feel free to enter questions into the question and answer box. Thanks. Great. So our next speakers will talk about the an NDC study that they did. Laurel Pogorsh from Oxfam is the Associate Policy Advisor for Climate Change and Energy team, and she'll be co-presenting with Asara Nifon Sonogo from Oxfam's regional platform in West Africa.
Hi, thank you, and hi everyone. So I'd like to introduce a paper we at Oxfam and the World Resources Institute wrote together and released at the end of last year with the generous support from CCAC. So the aim of this paper was to promote more ambitious and more directed inclusion of agriculture in the next round of NDCs and incorporate solutions that can help the agriculture sector be more sustainable, equitable, and resilient with reduced emissions. So in the first round of NDCs, actually over 90% of countries mentioned agriculture in some way. Many countries highlighted adaptation, mitigation as well. However, some lacked some key details of how targets would be achieved and missed some synergies between mitigation and adaptation actions. So some significant gaps remain, which also present opportunities as countries now update their NDCs. So we have a few key messages from the paper, which you see. The first being looking at benefits of addressed agriculture in NDCs. In doing so, there are opportunities to focus on adaptation and increase support for adaptation. So as we know, climate change is already impacting where and how our food is produced around the world, with high temperatures, droughts, severe storms, already reducing crop yields, but also impacting food security and livelihoods of farmers and their families, which brings us to supporting farmers, especially vulnerable and small-scale farmers, pastoralists, and indigenous peoples who rely on agriculture and who really need to be included in planning and implementation processes as well. Policymakers can enhance their NDCs by choosing actions that both improve the lives and livelihoods of farmers and reduce emissions. This reduction of emissions is key because the agriculture sector contributes upwards of 13% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And reducing emissions can also be aligned with other development plans and strategies, including the Sustainable Development Goals. NDCs are also being used to attract investment and finance, including the NDC Partnerships Climate Enhancement Package. And that's a $15 million fund being deployed to countries to help strengthen and implement NDC targets. Next slide, please. So the second main point of this paper is about embracing solutions that are win-win for adaptation, mitigation, and farmers. And we highlight a range of 15 options that can be taken to reduce emissions and build resilience in the agriculture sector. These actions are illustrative of the range of possibilities, recognizing each action should be tailored and fit to the national context, and many are not feasible everywhere, but they can broadly be grouped into the categories you see here: improved crop management, livestock management, broader land management, such as reduced use of fire, utilizing agroecological practices like agroforestry, and improved soil and water management. And lastly, more sustainable production and consumption measures like reducing food loss and waste and shifting diets. Next slide, please. So the final point of this work is that agriculture contributions in an enhanced NDC can be done in a variety of ways. Those are listed here. Many countries have economy-wide targets and are working to strengthen those, but there are also options to include agriculture in an enhanced NDC in other ways. So that includes strengthened implementation measures, a more inclusive process, strengthened governance and extension services, and ways to also streamline and mobilize financing. There are also specific agricultural policies and actions that can be taken, like what I mentioned a bit earlier, that support both reduced emissions, build resiliency, and promote adaptation. And clarity and transparency of climate policies also can go a long way in facilitating an understanding of the benefits of those actions, especially if these include all stakeholders and are set up and tailored to the agricultural context of small-scale farmers and the most vulnerable communities. So with that quick overview, I'd like to actually pass to my colleague Azara, the West Africa Regional Lead for Food Justice. She'll take us through the foundations for action on enhanced NDCs and the importance of setting up an enabling policy environment, highlighting the West African context. So with that, I will pass off to you, Azara.
Thank you very much, Laurel, and good morning or good afternoon to all participants. So before going through the different foundations for action, let me come briefly back to the situation of climate change in the West African region. All West African countries are experiencing changes in rainfall distribution, an increase in temperature, and the occurrence of extreme weather events. The impact of these meteorological and climatic phenomena are already being felt in various sectors, of which the agri sector is particularly affected. The impact of the agricultural sector on the impact on the agriculture sector, particularly on crop yields, farm income, and livestock, are considerable. According to 2 studies carried out in Burkina Faso, a 2.5 degrees Celsius warming will lead to a 46% drop in agriculture income by 2090-2099, while a 7% drop in average annual rainfall would lead to a total loss of income for all farms. With a warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, drought and aridity will render between 40 and 80% of agricultural land unsuitable for growing maize, millet, or sorghum by 2030-2040. The reduction in agricultural production will put pressure on prices and directly affect the 4 pillars of food security, especially for women and the most vulnerable. So it's urgent for countries to target their greenhouse gas emission reduction, as well as to cope with adaptation strategy with the current climate change effect. So as my colleague Laurel said, the paper promotes win-win solution for adaptation and mitigation benefits and those that work for farmers. The solutions are technical, but not only. Some principles should guide the action as the way to implement them. We call them the foundation for action. And
It looks like we missed Asara, so I think we should, her connection is unstable. So Catalina, I suggest we continue to the next speakers.
Okay, sure. Unless, Laurel, would you like to find out the presentation?
Sure.
Oh, she's back. Asara, welcome back. We missed you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. I will resume at the first foundation action, which is establishing policy coherence. So after scoping the national context to identify the production and consumption trends of livestock and crops, countries should work to establish a policy coherence between climate, agriculture, and trade policies, and a strong coordination among ministries towards the NDCs target. I want to illustrate the need of policy coherence building by taking the example of the ECOWAS policies. At the ECOWAS level, an agriculture and rural department committed to reach out the food security of the region and the reduction of food imports by developing the local food production and processing, launched by 2016 the rice offensive, and by 2017 the milk offensive under the regional agriculture policy ECOWAS, with the aim to develop these local value chains. In 2018, a study commissioned by the Institution Department of Trade and Custom reported that the current common external tariff offers little protection to local agriculture and agri-food products, which undermine the development despite the investment made in the sector. This conclusion means that the agriculture target won't be achieved as long as the common external tariff, the expression of the regional trade policy, remains unchanged. This highlights that the coordination for policy coherence between national adaptation plans and programs of action by biodiversity programs or desertification combat programs will be decisive for achieving the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. Another key foundation for success of the NDC's implementation process is involving all stakeholders identified in the national context. The experience of the ECOWAS regional milk offensive strategy and its priority investment program development could be a reference on how to involve all the diverse parties at the regional national level in the process of target identification, strategies to achieve them, and cost of the action, etc. The 2 years process benefit to the quality of the program action as well as its durability. Because so many farmers, breeders, fishers are already facing climate change impact, this broad range of stakeholders has both information needs and knowledge to share regarding effective adaptation and mitigation measures.
Asara, excuse me, we are out of time. Would you mind wrapping up your presentation?
Okay, my final focus is on identifying opportunities for support. The West African government should identify the support needs in each sector to make breeders, farmers, fishers more resilient to climate change. To illustrate, quality livestock feeds can improve milk production in the Sahelian countries of West Africa, where milk is key for the resilience and food security of pastoralist communities. So investment and funding mechanisms should improve livestock feeds and support pastoralists to cope with climate change effects on the availability of grazing and water resources. We enable the 51 million of pastoralists in the region to increase their livestock productivity and hence the resilience to climate change effects. Next slide, please. So you can learn,
I think we'll have to wrap up, but thank you very much.
You can learn more about this when you can then download the full discussion paper at the free website pages that are on the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asara. Our next speakers are David Omotosho from John Davis and Associates and Chris Malley from SEI, in Sweden. And they will be discussing an overview of national action planning on SLCPs in Nigeria and a greenhouse gas mitigation analysis.
Thank you very much. The Nigerian National Short-Lived Climate Pollutant Planning process was undertaken under the CCAC Supporting National Action and Planning on Short-Lived Climate Pollutant Mitigation Initiative. This program was coordinated by the Climate Change Department of the Federal Ministry of Environment. And the aims of the programs include identifying the major sources of short climate pollutants, air pollutants, and greenhouse gases. Also, the effort was to identify, evaluate, and prioritize mitigation options to reduce short-lived climate pollutants in the country. And lastly, the effort was to develop an action plan to take forward priority short-lived climate pollutants mitigation measures. The exercise involved extensively all stakeholders in the nation, which includes NGOs, MDAs, CSOs, development partners, as well as international organizations. And the final product, the plan, was endorsed by the Federal Executive Council of Nigeria in May 2019. The next slide. The first step in the process involves the analysis of short-lived climate pollutant sources, which includes the inventory of dominant short-lived climate pollutants using the LEAP integrated benefit calculator, activity data derived from the nation, as well as emission factor. It also did quantify emissions of short-lived climate pollutants, which include those for methane, black carbon, as well as for other pollutants and other greenhouse gases. Data availability was a great problem and a significant limitation to the analysis that we carried out. And as a result of that, the IPCC Tier 1 methodologies was primarily used for methane and GH emission analysis, while the EMP, EEA Tier 1 methodologies was used for air pollutant emission analysis. For data that we could not source locally, the FAO stat data were used. The next slide. The result of the analysis consists of historical emission from agriculture, and the results place agricultural emissions within the context of emission from other sources like residential, power, and others. The result shows that agri makes a significant contribution to methane emissions in the nation. And also, as we could see, even from the slide before us, it shows that ammonia emissions also is a major source of the pollutants. And it is of note that this is the first time in the nation that these emissions will be quantified. Next slide. Next slide. After the analysis, The next effort centers on the identification of mitigation measures. And the exercise in undertaking this reviewed national policies, plans, and strategies in all sectors. It's also reviewed international reports such as UNEP, WMO 2011 assessment. And on the basis of this being the foundation, some criteria were used to identify the measures, and this includes alignment with sustainable development goals, alignment with ECOWAS renewable energy and energy efficiency agenda, as well as the better air quality agreement. Also part of the criteria includes short-lived climate pollutant emission reduction potential, alignment with national and sector priorities, operational feasibility, technical feasibility, funding feasibility, as well as socio-cultural acceptability. Next slide. In all, 22 mitigation measures were identified across 8 sectors. And of these, 4 priority mitigation measures were identified in the agricultural sectors. And this include increased adoption of intermittent aeration of paddy rice fields, reducing open field burning of crop residue, promotion of aerobic direction, then reduction of methane emission from eccentric fermentation. And from the next slides, my partner, Chris, will continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omatosho. And I think the other thing to highlight there about the 22 mitigation measures that were identified and included in the national SLCP plan that were then endorsed is that those 4 mitigation measures identified in the agriculture sector were evaluated against a large number of mitigation measures across all source sectors. And the actions in the agriculture sector were found to be, among the most effective to include in this SLCP plan, which covers all economic sectors. This graph here shows the result or the estimated benefits, the estimated result of implementing all of those 22 mitigation measures in terms of their effectiveness at reducing black carbon emissions. And you can see from this graph that by 2030, implementing all of those mitigation measures was estimated to reduce black carbon emissions by about 80% in 2030 compared to the baseline value. The majority of that benefit comes from actions to reduce the use of biomass for cooking in the residential sector. But a significant proportion of that benefit also comes from the agriculture sector, from reducing the burning of agricultural residues. And I think, reflecting on what some previous speakers have said about the need to align NDCs with development priorities, reducing black carbon emissions and emissions of other air pollutants which have a direct impact on health is one way to anchor an enhanced NDC in achieving local development benefits through reductions in air pollution exposure and improvements in health. And I think that's shown here in Nigeria's SLCP plan. On the next slide, we see the benefits for methane reductions. There's a slightly lower reduction compared to black carbon, but still by 2030, the actions that were identified in Nigeria's national SLCP plan were estimated to reduce methane emissions by approximately 50%. And about half of this benefit comes from actions in the agriculture sector. The other half comes predominantly from actions to reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas sector. So there are a substantial component of this national SLCP plan, which Dr. Bapa and colleagues in Nigeria are going to talk about later, comes from taking actions in the agricultural sector. The main conclusions, I think, from the analytical process that was gone through in Nigeria to provide the inputs to the national SLCP plan, which are shown on the next slide, are that there was a substantial limitation of data in a lot of sectors, including agriculture, to be able to do a more detailed integrated air pollution and climate change analysis. And that building capacity in national institutions to do this analysis is really useful and can help to bridge those data gaps, but also for this analysis to be sustained and updated over time to monitor the implementation of these actions. And as Dr. Bappa and others are going to talk about, the assessment, the quantification of the emissions and the emission reductions and the benefits of these actions need to be linked to a formal national planning process to then feed in and influence decision making. Finally, before we finish, on the next slide, I just wanted to highlight an initiative that the CCAC is undertaking that could help to bridge some of these data gaps and to facilitate capacity building on integrated assessment of air pollution and climate change in Africa. In 2019, the CCAC agreed to fund a assessment of air pollution, climate change and development in Africa that is going to assess how development in Africa can proceed while at the same time limiting increases in air pollution and its impacts on health, and understanding the potential to limit climate change in the near term and what implications that has for adaptation in Africa. And on the final slide, I just want to highlight that as part of that, we will be undertaking a modeling exercise for all economic sectors, including the agriculture sector, with a team of international and African modelers that will develop national scale models of emissions for all economic sectors, including the agricultural sector, that could be used as the basis for national planning in the future. And if anybody here is interested in getting involved in that assessment, please feel free to contact me or the CCAC Secretariat, and we'd be very happy to work with you on it. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you all of our speakers. I'll now hand over to Catalina Echeverri to facilitate the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the segment 1 panelists. It was all very interesting to hear from you. Now I would like to present everybody to the second part of the event, which will showcase country examples from West Africa that are that can provide some examples on how more ambitious action across agriculture and food systems can help achieve the Paris Agreement's goals for addressing climate change. And we have some special speakers today with a highlight on Nigeria, who has endorsed a national action plan on SLCPs and agriculture measures, followed by Ivory Coast and Senegal. So without further ado, I present you to Bala Bappa, the CCAC SNAP Implementation Coordinator from the Federal Ministry of Environment, Nigeria. And I would like to remind panelists that we are keeping time. So thank you for keeping to your allotted time. Please go ahead, Bala. Bala, I believe you might be muted. Please begin. Hello, Bala and colleagues at the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. I've just unmuted you. If you could please try speaking. We hear you. Please go ahead.
Are you?
We can now hear you.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay,
Father, we can now hear you.
much of what I wanted to say has been highlighted by my colleagues. Okay, so what I wanted to present has been said by my colleagues, Doctors Omotosho and Chris. All the same, they have spoken about the national planning process, and I will maybe take us through the institutional strengthening, stakeholder coordination, and the implementation of the National Action Plan, and the strategies to mainstream the national action to the national development process, and the funding for the implementation of the SLCP projects in the country, and the efforts to entrench sustainability. Of my presentation will include the key action included in the National Action Plan, the overview of the emission sources, and priority mitigation measures, which has been highlighted by Dr. Omotosho, but I will still mention some few things that have been omitted. Then the process of developing the policy briefing, that is linking the SLC issues to Nigeria agriculture together with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, as well as the Ministry of Environment. Then I will highlight some aspects of the Nigerian agricultural brief, and then the next steps in the implementation of the National Action Plan. So next slide. So the overview of the National Action Plan. As I said earlier, much has been said about the process, but we signed the PCA, and the implementation of the SNAP started in June 2015 with the appointment of the National Focal Point. Then a coordination office was established in the Ministry of Environment, liaising with stakeholders, including NGOs, CBOs, and development partners, as well as international development partners. Then we inaugurated the advisory and the task force group, key stakeholders that were identified. Then we proceeded with regular consultative, and then the SNAP initiative provided a platform where we interacted, and then proceeded to develop the National Action Plan, and we are currently at the implementation stage. Nigeria is active in several CCAC initiatives, including oil and gas, SNAP, agriculture, municipal waste, health, HFCs, diesel, and to some extent BRICS. And we developed the National Action Plan, as I earlier mentioned, with the participation of the contributions of the stakeholders, both MDAs, the non-governmental organizations, and then the international development partners participated. But we are, the coordination was by our partners, which are the Stockholm Environment Institute, IUPA, and UNEP Regional Office for Africa. So as mentioned earlier by Dr. Omotosho, the plan was endorsed by our national, the Federal Executive Council of Ministers, and it is now currently under implementation. So the next slide is the key actions included in the National Action Plan included our strategy of establishing desk offices in the MDAs to coordinate the SLCP issues for sustainability. And we also, emphasize mainstreaming of the SLCP mitigation measures into our national development process, which is the economic growth and recovery plan, which is being developed by the Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, and we are participating actively in it. And we hope that the measures will be included in our national development process. Then another strategy we adopted was the emphasis on budgetary provisions for SLCP projects in MDA in MDA budgets, so that SLCP projects will be funded and implemented, which will result into reduction of emissions. Then there are some projects that are funded by our national budget, and there are some that will have to be funded by national donors. And we are working closely with the CCAC, the Agri Initiative, We have identified areas and we have written some project concept notes which are currently under consideration, and we hope to get funding for some of the projects that will require international funding. The next slide. As earlier mentioned, identified 4 mitigation measures in which will include a reduction of methane emissions from enteric fermentation. This will entail the implementation of actions such as improved feed and husbandry practices. All these measures, I have my colleagues here who are specialists who have been working together in the development of the National Action Plan and the implementation, and currently working closely with the CCAC to implement the measures. We're talking about activities as regards to a reduction of SLCPs in the agri sector. The second measure we identified is the promotion of anaerobic digestion from manure, from livestock and poultry. And the third one is the reduction of open field burning from crop use. All this will be highlighted by my colleagues who are seated with me. And then the final one is the increased adoption of intermittent aeration in the flooded rice to reduce emission of methane. This will also be highlighted by my colleague, Dr. Fatima. Then the next is talking about the process we adopted in developing the policy briefings, which we tried to link with the SLCP measures in the Nigerian's SLCP agricultural policies. So we had consultations with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and the Ministry of Environment. So the departments that were involved were the Department of Climate Change and Rural Development, the Department of Animal Husbandry, and the Department of Veterinary and Pest Control Services, as well as the Department of Agriculture, the Rice Value Chain Desk Office. So we all met and reviewed the existing agricultural policies and programs currently under implementation as it relates to the change, climate change and SLCP emission mitigation. Develop strategies for implementing the 4 approved SLCP mitigation measures, and identify some SLCP mitigation projects, which some are currently under implementation in the ministries, and the others we are working to get support to implement from international donor partners to implement some of them. So we also, together with the Stockholm Environment Institute, developed a monitoring and evaluation framework, which will be subsumed into the national MRV for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Stockholm Environment Institute, and is currently available, and we are going to subsume it into the national MRV plan. So the next slide, these are the highlights of the Nigerian project brief, in which we reviewed the existing policies. There is a policy of agriculture policy 2016 to 2020 document, which is tagged the green alternative, which focuses agriculture as a business. So the emphasis is in agriculture this time around as a business, both involves the large-scale, medium, and small-scale farmers, which will be, provided with financial support, extension services, inputs, and all that is required to improve agricultural production in Nigeria, including the value chain approach, and agricultural linkages with other sectors. We are working on mainstreaming climate change into agricultural planning and development. And this emphasizing the climate smart agriculture, which is supported by FAO to increase productivity, build resilience, and reduce emissions, which the emphasis on specific, measurable, achievable, reliable, and timely activities. This will be promoted through agricultural extension and other measures that the Ministry of Agriculture is pursuing. And the implementation of the approved SLCP plan agricultural measures, as I earlier mentioned, the strategy is to identify those projects, promote their inclusion in the national budget, and then some of them that cannot be implemented with the budget, we are sourcing funding from international donor partners. So that is as regards the highlights of the agricultural policy brief. And the next step, which the strategies we are adopting to Department of Climate hosted the development of the National Action Plan together with the MDAs, and in this particular aspect, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, which spearheaded the identification and recommendation of the mitigation measures, and are currently involved in the implementation of the measures to reduce SLCPs in the agricultural sector. So we are working with the Ministry of Budget and National Planning, as earlier mentioned, to mainstream the National Action Plan into the development process, and also ensure budgetary provision to MDS for SLCP mitigation. Other measures that will require international support, we are working on it with the CCAC to help source funding for the implementation, and we have developed concept notes and are currently being considered by the CCAC, and some will be forwarded to other development partners. And we also work of environment to and we have achieved inclusion of the SLC measures into the revised NDC, which the exercise that has just been is going on, but we have made sure that the SLC measures have been included in the revised NDC, which will attract NDC partnership and the CAP and the other implementers. So this is so far with the major strategies we are considering. We are currently implementing to reduce SLCPs generally, but in particular in the I stop here, and my colleagues will talk about their activities in their respective areas as you will hear very soon. Thank you, Catalina.
Thank you very much, Bala. We now have the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, Cyril Bicom. If you could please present and keep within 4 minutes. We are a bit over time. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. My end here. My name is Fayaba. I'll be representing Mr. Bicom, who is in his schools right now. Next slide, please. Catalina, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. I'm on the land use and climate change slide.
Okay, thank you. So from what is involved, we are from the presentation here now, we're defining what we mean by land use. The definition of land use means the management and modification of natural environment into built environments such as field, pasture, and settlement. Or alternatively, you can also define it as the arrangement, activities, and input people undertaking in certain land cover to produce change or maintain it. Agricultural use in Nigeria can be categorized into uses as arable crop production, forestry-related, grazing land, fish pond, tourism. The agricultural and forestry land use are followed all over the world. Most times when you see it, you find out that agriculture contributes a lot into emission of GHG into the environment. So likewise in Nigeria, we also, agricultural sector also contributes a large chunk of it into the environment. We contribute GHG a lot into the, and that's why we're having the 60% as in agri sector of Nigeria. So this also contributes to issue of climate change. You can also highlighted issue of climate change as relates to agriculture. In as much as you as much as they meet GAG, will always increase. So you should expect. So you should expect that once your temperature increases, you expect that your GHG emission is becoming higher. So please, next slide. Next slide.
Yes, I am on the conclusion slide. Yes,
Okay.
I hear you. I am on the conclusion slide.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So on the conclusion side, we're talking of reduction of open burning. Yeah, for my own department, I'm from the Agricultural and Climate department. We concentrate more of open burning, and these are implement for us to reduce the effect of open burning. One is that number one, which is marking a vulnerable area with to embark into the mapping of those vulnerable areas where they carry out a lot of open burning activities, so that we sensitize them. And so the number two now is promotion of agricultural waste and residue for energy. This is from by the time you sensitize them, talk to them, is
Hello, Mustafa. I'm very sorry. It's Ms. Yabo. It's
okay.
Yes. The connection is
Hello?
the connection is very bad. Yes, I'm sorry. Your connection is very bad. If you could sit closer to the microphone. Hello, your connection is quite bad. If you could please sit closer.
Can you hear me?
Yes, this is much better. Yes, much better. If you could please conclude the presentation. Thank you. I hear you better.
Hello?
I hear you well. If you could please conclude your portion of the presentation. Okay, unfortunately, we seem to have lost Mustafa, who was presenting on behalf of Cyril. I will move on to the next presenter, who is Hakim. Hello, I can now hear. If you could please present Mr. Hakim Ibilade.
These are the action plans we plan to implement to reduce open burning as regards to agricultural activities on the field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we regret the connectivity issue. As well from Nigeria, we have Hakim Ibilade from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. Welcome, Hakim. You may now begin to present the SLCP actions identified as part of the Department of Animal Husbandry Services.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Hakim. Please go ahead.
Yeah, they can hear you. Okay. My name is Hakim. I'm from the Department of Animal Husbandry Services, the Ministry of Agriculture. This afternoon, I'm going to talk about what the department is doing to mitigate the effect of greenhouse gas and SLCPs. In Nigeria, we are looking forward to reducing for milk and some other animal products. And this will automatically lead to increased production on our part. At the same time, we have to be prepared for associated GHG and SLCP emission. And we are through capacity building, raising the capacity of our farmers. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, please. The next slide. Hello? Okay, so we want to do this through what we call the cattle breed improvement program. And the cattle breed program is going to be carried out using artificial insemination to have more cattle. We want to use the semen, and the assumption is that more people, more farmers will be interested in this program. So what we now do alongside capacity building is to introduce what we call the standard operation procedure for the farmers, so that right from the beginning, they know exactly how to mitigate the GHG and SLCPs. Again, we are training them on how to use input so that rumination period will be reduced in cattle. At the same time, we go into good animal husbandry practices and harvesting of pasture at early stage. Next slide. Then we as well talk about the processing of crop used for our ruminants generally. We believe we can reduce stress, or the stress on having to burn the crop residues. So we now convert them to animal feed through feed blocks and crop residues processing and utilization methods. Together with construction of environment-friendly houses for sheep and goats and cattle, we install anaerobic digesters for cooperative farmers, for cooperative cattle farmers, so that we reduce emission, that's methane emission into the environment. Then we raise their capacity on careful synthetic fertilizers. Next. Okay. On. For beef and using genetic improvement, we are now starting interior using more animals. And those ones that stay short majority period are made on the farm. Then we modify systems of production in order to leave a smaller carbon footprint. That's with less emission, that's low energy requirement and fewer waste production. Then we breed more resistant crops and pastures for dairy consumption. That's more resistant to droughts, diseases. Then we implement environmentally friendly and more effective farming practices, including the housing. And we adopt housing systems that reduce emission, just like the elevated goat house I talked about. I think we are linking up with the CCAC to help in emission. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Hakeem.
Department of Energy Services. Okay. The presentation will well on having to follow the Department of Energy Services. It's really different. And focusing more on this techniques of disease control. We believe with better production methods.
Excuse me.
Animal.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
processing, especially in the solid waste. Take care of this waste so it doesn't affect the environment. Because waste will have a social and environmental impact. The environmental impact is we have the SLCP and the GHT, the type of vaccine used and the to prevent emission based in the Department of Veterinary Services. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And apologies, the connectivity was bad, but we will now, I understand you were presenting on behalf of Dr. Elimi, and we have the slides available because they were at the end. But we will now move on to Dr. Fatima Aliyu, Deputy Director and Head of the Cereals Division from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. Welcome, Dr. Fatima, if you can please.
Good afternoon. The presentation from the rice value chain development. Rice is a strategic food for achieving food nutrition. Our total demand for rice now is 7 million metric tons of milled rice. Based on 35 kg per capita consumption. Presently, 70% of total rice production is under irrigated ecology. And it is well documented rice production and burning of rice costs is a major contributor to greenhouse emissions. So in Nigeria, we took that into consideration when developing the National Rice Development Strategy 2020-2030. So we included measures for the promotion of alternative wet and dry irrigation methods, their displacement. Indeed, we took a lot of measures. We included a lot of measures for climate-smart agriculture because we are concerned about climate change and what is happening. And rice is a major casualty of all this. So we took a lot of things into consideration. But we added this AWD, urea displacement, as well as the briquetting of rice hulls, using it for energy and for animal feed as well. And then we also are in the process of establishing our own sustainable rice platform in Nigeria. As you all know, the sustainable rice platform is a global platform for rice producers and majorly to take into consideration the environment in the production of rice. So GIZ are presently helping us in setting up that our platform. So all these activities are expected to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse emissions from rice production in the country, to also result in sustainable rice production for enhanced food and nutrition security as well as the environment. And we hope that CAC will support us in this activity in order to achieve our objective in the rice sector, which is food security, self-sufficiency rice production for enhanced food security, and also contribute to Nigeria's achievement of the SDG, that really sustainable development goals of no hunger, poverty reduction, clean environment, gender equality, and partnership for progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatima, and to the colleagues at the Nigerian Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. Dr. Alimi's presentation was already delivered, and we will make sure to share those. Now I would like to introduce Benjamin Brida, the CCAC National Focal Point and Coordinator from the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development from Côte d'Ivoire. So welcome, Benjamin. Please begin your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Catalina. So today I'm going to introduce you to the implementation of agriculture SLCP measures under the National Action Plan on SLCP and its linkage to the NDC process. Next slide. Okay, so just before starting, I'd like to give you a bit of background of this plan, which was developed between 2016 and 2019 by the Ministry of Environment. And the development of this plan was led by the SLCP Coordination Unit. It was approved last year in November, and the plan actually do an evaluation of different policies and measures in terms of effectiveness and also targeting different SLCP, namely black carbon emissions. The key sources sector covered by this plan are the residential sector, transportation, agriculture, waste, and oil and gas. Next slide. And the plan actually identified 16 mitigation measures included in this plan, which was agreed in consultation with the stakeholders. 8 measures of this plan focus on black carbon, and the 8 other measures target methane. The overall plan will cut carbon emissions by 60% in 2030 and 80% in 2040. For methane emissions, we can reach a 34% reduction by 2030, and at least half. We can reduce by half the methane emission by 2040. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So here I'm giving you an overview of the measures among the 16 measures that target agricultural sectors. The first one is a measure that is targeting black carbon within the agricultural sector, which is to reduce the ozone burning on the field. And we have other 2 measures that target methane, mainly the extension of practice within the country and also the extension of the control of emissions from livestock. And for each measure, we also, during this plan, identify the ambition, the status of the measure, the priority of this measure at the national level, as well as different stakeholders that will be involved in the implementation and leading the measure. You can notice here that the AWD, the measure related to AWD is one of the key components of this plan in terms of agricultural sector, because it's directly linked to the national rice production strategy, which aims at reaching self-sufficiency in rice. And from the discussion with the stakeholders, it was agreed that by targeting 90% of rice cultivation practice through AWD, we can reach a significant reduction. We can reach at the same time the target of self-sufficiency in rice production, but also we can reduce a significant amount of methane from the sector. Let's go to the next slide to see how all these measures within the sector will impact the emissions from the agricultural sector. So here we can reach at least 10% reduction in black carbon emissions, which mainly results from the implementation of the reduction of open burning measures, and also at least 26 to 28% reduction of methane emissions from the agricultural sector, mainly from rice cultivation, but also livestock. Next slide, please. Okay, implementation of this plan at the national level. As part of the the SNAP initiative, the phase 2 of the SNAP initiative, we identified 3 main areas of implementation for the plan. The first one is to strengthen the overall coordination at the national level, which is going to have a joint implementation committee for the plan, and also will ensure the alignment of the plan, the implementation of the plan with the national policy framework and the CCAC 2030 vision. The second area of work will be to increase our action with the different sectors by supporting the implementation with strong analysis, developing funding proposals, and also starting mitigation action, which is really important, particularly for the progress under the commitment we are making at the international level. And also one important area is the integration into cost-cutting plan, mainly the National Development Plan, climate change planning, and also air quality planning. Moving now further into the implementation, talking about the agricultural sector itself. Next slide, please. Based on all these different area of work and activities that were identified as the main area of implementation. Of course, the funding aspect of SLCP measure was one of the key actions to be implemented, and this will be done actually through the development of very consistent funding proposal that will support the implementation of this action. And one funding proposal that was actually developed last year with the support of the Household Energy Initiative and also the Agricultural Initiative. The CCAC was actually to foster the implementation of short-lived climate pollutants in the agricultural sector using rice residue, but also try to link that residue to a pathway from waste to energy. And this is one of the key proposals that is actually under serious consideration, both at the CCAC, but also with other donors, such as the FAA. And one key area of work for the implementation also is the integration of the SLCP measures in the future NDC and other agricultural sector plans. And for the NDC revision, we are actually quite advanced in this area. We were able to secure several support to work on that. Next slide, please. And we are actually working with the support of FAO for the revision of the actual sector, but also we have one critical support with the NDC partnership type initiative to maintain SLCP in all economic sectors, including the agricultural sector. And as part of those two areas of work, we are actually working together. All the two working team are actually working in strong consultation to make sure that the next version of the NDC of Cote d'Ivoire will have highly or clearly implementable SLCP measure highlighted in the paper, which is key actually for the implementation of this plan in the next year. And during also the development of the plan, one aspect that was really important, that I think is really important for us in Cote d'Ivoire, was the link between the planning process and the research that is going on. We were able to, during this plan, achieve some good results by integrating up-to-date research that was going on at the University of Abidjan. And we, on this cycle of planning, we are also aiming at integrating all the research on the impact of ozone that is being undertaken at the SLCP Center on Climate Change and Biodiversity into our estimates to support with strong analysis and implementation of this plan. And with that, I think I will Thank you all, and you can have more information of this plan on the CCAC website. And thank you for giving the opportunity of highlighting this.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for your presentation. I am now pleased to present Yata. He's from the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Senegal, and he will also be sharing his country experience. Please welcome Lamine. Please go ahead. And I remind participants to enter any questions they might have in the question box. Thank you.
Presentation will be focusing on agriculture sector, and as you know, agriculture is very close to land use sector, so it will be a cross-cutting intervention. Thank you. Just to present Senegal, it is located in the western extremity of Africa continent, but what is very important to keep here is Senegal is part of the Sahelian region. This region, which is characterized by very hard ecological conditions, in which economical growth and social well-being have to be faced diverse constraints, such like erratic rainfalls, high temperature, and water scarcity, with important impact, negative impact on livestock and crop production. It is also important to know that the population is about 16 million, and about 70% of this population livelihoods are rely on the primary sector, especially agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, and also livestock. The actual development vision, what we call it the Plan Senegal Emergent, vision is to achieve economic growth and social well-being throughout agriculture. And it's we are now, the phase 2 is running, and in this phase 2 we are just going for green growth, and this green growth will be go throughout agroecology and reforestation. Next slide, please. Yes, from this ambitious vision of Senegal to achieve a green growth. Do you hear me? Hello?
Perfectly. Yes, Lamine, we hear you well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. From this ambitious vision of the government to achieve a green growth and social well-being, we have to face some constraints we have in terms of land degradation, because agriculture, livestock, and forestry are rely on land use. And in Senegal, we have this problematic even in the remaining countries of the Sahelian region, land degradation. And now we have just to be reducing, stopping, and reversing this multifaceted phenomena of land degradation in next 15 years, because our development targets is about 2035. And then in the government, we are just conducting a holistic and integrated approach to face land degradation. In Senegal, as we can see, in different ecological regions of Senegal, we are facing land degradation due to water, to salinization, water erosion, and wind erosion. And this is very important problematic if we are going to achieve to fulfill our commitment in terms of zero hunger, in terms of sustainable development goals, UNCCD, and climate action, such as the work undergoing on the Coronivia joint work on agriculture. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. And in this, I'm just going to share progress made in the government side to create an enabling environment that aim to catalyze interventions and funding in terms of land degradation. And we are going just to be interested by two components of these efforts, such as institutional arrangement and policy area. In institutional arrangement, we have a National Pedology Institute and the Directorate in charge of water, forest, and soil conservation that are committed by the government to take interventions in the area of land degradation. And we are just with the second phase of our economic growth policy. We set up a national reforestation and the Great Green World agencies, which is going to implement some activity to restore vegetation and land for soil fertility and to improve productivity in the agriculture area. In terms of policy, we have since 2004 set up a holistic law, agro-silvopastoral orientation law, to keep a comprehensive interventions amongst the primary sector in terms of livestock, agriculture, land use sector, to have a development, a green development in this sector. And we have also set up another policy, a national strategic investment framework for sustainable land use management, which identifies the problematic of land degradation, causes, solutions, and stakeholders, how we can go with synergy to tackle in a sustainable manner this course. And in climate change area also, we have set up, identified agriculture as a priority intervention sector with the first national adaptation, national action plan for climate change adaptation with 3 main programs, and one is a flagship program on agroforestry. We have also a national agriculture and food security investment plan when we have to, we have mainstreamed climate change activities in agriculture. And here, what is important to see is Senegal is one country where fertilizers use level is very low. It is about 8 to 15 kilograms per hectare. To increase our productivity, we are not going for reducing fertilizers use. It is not the option of the government, but what we can do here is to increase soil organic carbon throughout some good practices, agroecology, and climate smart agriculture. It is just to balance what we are going to have as emissions in agriculture sector by sequestration in soil or organic organic carbon. Next slide, please. Yes. Besides the government effort, we have also a very important multi-stakeholder dynamic in going in Senegal with civil society, farmers organizations, and financial and technical partners working to support the government establishing relevant policies to integrate an agroecology transition for climate action in Senegal. And this dynamic just provide a report submitted to the government to have clear actions actionable on the ground to achieve climate action in upcoming decades. And it's go through advocacy, lesson, and good practices sharing, coordination, synergies, studies on the potential of agroecology done by FAO with some partners, which show the potential of agroecology on implementing Coronivia joint work and other climate action into agriculture. And another option is to go for farmer school, because capacity building and going with farmers is very key if we want to achieve climate action in agriculture. So technologies, research, policies, finance, and synergy are very core if we want to go for agroecology transition. Next slide, please. Here, I'm just sharing some information about our national determined contribution, in which we have some commitment in 5 mitigation sectors, and agriculture and land use change is another sector. Agriculture is accounting for about 45% of national emissions. And on that, Senegal have some commitment on mitigation in the agriculture area. And when you see here at the down area here, it's the emission of agriculture. And where you see livestock sector is accounting for about 61% of sectoral emissions. And rice cultivation is accounting for about 5%. And for mitigation options in our NDC, we are going for 3 main components: compost use, agroforestry, and to promote the system of rice intensification. I hear this kind of option in the Nigeria presentation. And the system of rice intensification is very climate friendly and going for resilience, because for alternating wetting and drying in rice plots, we are going to reduce significantly greenhouse gas emissions. And we are going also to save seeds by to reduce the number of seeds, or the quantity of seed used by farmers by 90%, and to reduce also inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides, and to reduce by the time emission due to the methane, but also emission due to fertilizers. And at least the system is going to increase yields by 56 to 86%. The number is from the flagship S3 project, West Africa S3 project. And as you see in this diagram, if we compare the S3 yields with the static, or how we call it, the business as usual in rice cultivation, you see that this system is very important in terms of adaptation, because it is going to increase rice productivity by reducing greenhouse gas emission. In our NDC, it's one core option we identify. Next slide, please. The way forward, after defining our NDC options in terms of mitigation in agriculture sector, it is only options. We do not yet have a strategy of intervention to see how we can have very relevant programs that can work in any agroecology region. So the way forward will be, what we are going to do is to transform our NDC option to bankable, and to see how we can be using the potential of its agroecology region. Also developing a funding strategy for our NDC with bankable programs. The capacity building will be very important, and to how to see how we can enhance our M&E systems to be in coherence with what the NDC need in terms of MRV. To see also how we can set up a very important coordination and synergy system, and developing partnership for the implementation of our NDC. And the last one will be to develop research and capacity building. As we know, in the climate change area, even the government side, the farmer side, and partner side, we have to have a very comprehensive intervention option, and to develop synergies to success our climate action. In As a side, in terms of adaptation, we are developing our national adaptation plan in agriculture sector, and we go through studies to have some scientific evidence for intervention on the ground. Next slide, please. Yeah, the second slide is about, it is a transition in another sector. As Nigeria showed, we have a national air quality monitoring center in Senegal, which is based in the Ministry of Environment, but working with the meteorology agents and health sector to monitor the quality of air and giving some advice for when the air quality is going to be bad or getting worse for action. And we are working with the health department and meteorology action to provide some bulletin of information. And the center is also working on setting up facilitating the establishment of an observatory on air quality. And I think that it is very important in the climate and air quality coalition to see how we can a partnership with this center to tackle what Nigeria said, the short-lived air pollution that are also greenhouse gas. It is what I have to share with Senegal experiences, and I'm very apologize for my English because it's a French-speaking country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lamine, and thank you to all of the speakers for the great presentations. We'll jump into our final session with 3 speakers, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica McCarthy, representing ICCI and the University of Miami. And just a reminder to everybody to please enter your questions, because this session will be followed by a somewhat shorter question and answer period, about 20 minutes. Thank you. Jessica, are you on mute? Jessica, we cannot hear you.
Yes. Hello, I am here. I apologize.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. In these times, it can be difficult to contribute to international scientific work and be a parent, so I appreciate
I'm sorry, Jessica, your audio is quite low. Could you either find a way to increase it or speak closer to the mic?
Is that better?
Yeah, please continue.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And thank you again. It's difficult to parent and be a scientist right now, but thank you for having me today. Part of my work here was previewed early on, thinking about how to assist countries through the CCAC strategic planning. And so I want to show you some work using remote sensing and geospatial data for open burning and emissions in Nigeria. And during this work, we also expanded to show neighboring countries and, of course, strategic partners in West Africa, including the countries of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. Next slide. So we wanted to test just how well some of our remote sensing satellite-based products for both fire and land use could be used to map different types of contribution in open burning. Because while open burning is often defined as croplands only, we know that other types of land uses are often burned for agricultural purposes. So here we have included areas that might be considered agroforestry, as commented on previously by the esteemed speaker from Senegal, but also thinking about croplands, particularly rice lands, millet, maize, the grains, grasslands that can be used as pastures and shrubs areas as well. And as you can see, the fire regime in Nigeria, looking back in these last 5 years, it really peaks in October through March, and this corresponds with some of the harvesting and replanting, but it also follows the natural wildfire regime. Next slide. And so here, I just want to quickly go through what the pattern might look like for just a single year. So I'm going to turn off my camera so that my audio is a bit better. So essentially, January is normally the peak month for fires. This is kind of the pattern that we would see for fires at approximately 37,000. This is year 2019, but it's a similar level of fire from 2015 on. Next slide. And the pattern doesn't really change very much. We just see fewer fires. We're down to 17. March is the next slide. And we see concentrations in the north, but also in the central. And we're starting to see really a clustering around cropland areas, but also some pastoral and agroforestry systems. Keep going. And as we enter into April, May, and June, in the next slides, we really start to see, and even into July and August, these springtime, summer fires are not really occurring because it's hot. And actually, these are not when fires typically occur in West Africa. As we enter into September, October, and November, we see fires start to pick up, starting in our pastoral systems and then moving into some of our cropland systems. And into finally the end of the year in December of 2019, where we start to see the pattern reemerge that looked so bright in January. But now, again, most of our, what we would consider any agricultural systems are contributing to open burning. Next slide, please. So we wanted to compare the map we have done, which is more fine scale, with some of the global fire emissions databases. And these are 5 global fire emission databases that have been developed in collaboration with scientists in the EU, in the US, in Australia, and also in West Africa. This shows just 2019 open burning emissions for Nigeria from the different systems. It is important to note that the blue line, which is GFED, the Global Fire Emissions Database, is often the database that is cited or reported in comparison with the UNFCCC emissions reporting. And it happens to fall, of course, in the middle of these other 4 emission databases. QFED, which is in green, was actually developed by Dr. Charles Ichoku, formerly of the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, who is a Nigerian-American scientist and is currently leading an institute at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And he developed this fire emissions database with West Africa in mind. So the green line is a little higher. And note that 0.01 teragrams of annual emissions, we will come back to that. So that is the black carbon emissions from all open burning in Nigeria. Next slide. What we also wanted to do was to compare just how well our active fire products like VIRS and MODIS, which drive these global fire emissions databases, and often kind of high-level policy and climate discussions, compare to higher resolution, but also open source data. And everything presented here today is open source and, of course, available to be shared through all CCAC partners. We went ahead and found some locations of open burning in pastoral systems and hand digitized every burned area using Sentinel-2, 10-meter Sentinel-2 data, and then compared that to an automated burned area algorithm from 20-meter Sentinel-2 data. And as you can see on the left with the purple polygons, you're seeing a much larger amount of burned area when a human analyst is able to extract the burned area. Next slide. And when we compare that to the VIRS active fire product, which of course drives most of our global fire emissions databases, our hand digitized analyst-driven burned area product accounts for almost 25 square kilometers of more open burning than is detected even by the VIRS active fire data sets. So this is something that our governments and regional partners in West Africa should consider, that even using these global open source active fire products, we are likely underestimating the amount of open burning. Next slide, please. And while we want to think about how these compare from our open emissions for Nigeria from our 5 data sets, and then calculated the average of these 5 global emissions data sets. We wanted to show you how it also compares to the different methods using an analyst-driven burned area in green, the Sentinel-2 burned area in orange, in the bar graph on the right, and the VIIRS in purple. And so VIIRS actually will give you a higher emissions estimate because it assumes whole pixel burned, but it doesn't give you necessarily the right location. And it's really important that we get at the actual landowners, users, the indigenous and local populations that know the lands. I also want to put these emissions in context. At 0.01 teragrams of black carbon, that is actually equivalent to 1 year's worth of black carbon from natural gas flaring in the Niger Delta in Nigeria, according to a study released in 2015 of 50 years worth of data of black carbon emissions from gas flaring. So, reducing open burning emissions in Nigeria will have an impact, and I think previous speakers have shown that, including the session led by Bala. Next slide. We also wanted to show some of the extended work. Because this is open source data and it's geospatial, when we're asked to participate in CCAC research, we try to do as much as possible. And so we did extend this work into Ghana as well. And so here we have hand digitized burned area from Sentinel-2, and then also derived from an automated burned area algorithm. And the next slide will show the overlap of these two and in comparison with the VIIRS active fire. And similarly, we find a same thing, 27 square kilometers difference. But again, it's, we're not seeing the exact same pattern when we use the active fire. We're actually seeing some places burn twice within the same month or burn around them. And you can't gather that from the active fire data or the Sentinel-2 automated. Next slide, please. And so here we have the average again. Our hand digitized Sentinel-2 burned area algorithm actually produced emissions very similar to that of VIIRS in Ghana, and that's because we were looking at a cropland system versus a pastoral system in Nigeria. And so it seems that the VIIRS may actually be performing okay in the cropland systems, but not necessarily showing a spatial pattern that a policymaker would need for intervention strategies. Next slide. And so finally, I just want to wrap up with what crops and how this impacts yields. There's a lot of good work going on by West African scientists who are in state universities within West Africa, or who have now expanded into working in Chinese universities, European universities, American universities. And I want to highlight these two studies. So on the left is an example of the effect of crop residue burning on rice yield in Nigeria. And what they found was that rice growth was actually superior when soils were treated with the maintained crop residue than when it was burnt. And so it's important to think about how you go after solutions for crop residue burning and open burning so that you maintain soil health, which is, of course, an overlapping goal from all of these presentations. And then you're right, you will see a project from crop straw utilization and field burning in the northern region of Ghana. And here they found that actually it was not just rice, but what was driving the fire here was maize, sorghum, groundnuts, millet, and cowpeas, and soy as well. And so getting after solutions here has more to do with working with farmers across a variety of crop types and different types, of course, management, tillage, and just needs, as each crop variety is not the same. And what's really important as well is that they found that open burning caused a decline in yield of about, reported by almost 66% of respondents. And so this is not necessarily a practice that farmers are in love with, but of course, like all tools for agriculture, it is a tool that has been used to reduce costs and often time. And so we want to come at solutions that way as well. And so with that, I will wrap up the presentation. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. Our next speaker is Achim Mwape from the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre, and he will be speaking on GRA's strategy for Africa.
Thanks, Lini, and good afternoon and evening to everyone listening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate and speak in this important workshop. As Lini has already stated, I will discuss the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases, particularly its strategy for Africa. And I'll also explain some of the work that New Zealand and other partners are doing in this forum to support country efforts to enhance agriculture and climate action in Africa. Just allow me to switch off my video to just improve internet connectivity. Next, let me just begin by highlighting the global food challenge, which other speakers have already alerted to. We need healthy food to feed the 9 billion people who we do project to have by 2050 within the same capacity of our Earth under a very responsive and changing climate. So what that slide simply shows is that we are increasing in terms of population and requiring better food, but the capacity of the Earth remains the same and is significantly reducing because of the challenges of climate change. On the next slide, I just wanted to highlight what we are as the Global Research Alliance. This is simply a network of governments that are interested in agricultural emissions and their effect on climate change and food security. The GRA brings countries together to find ways to grow more food without growing greenhouse gas emissions. Some of our objectives include to increase agriculture productions with lower emissions and also to improve global cooperation in research. As you can see from that slide, we currently have 62 member countries, 17 of which are from Africa. And within West Africa, we have Benin, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Senegal. The GRIA operations are normally through 4 key research groups. We have a research group on paddy rice research, livestock research, croplands research, and also we have an integrated or integrative research groups which looks at cross-cutting issues. On my next slide, I just want to highlight the context in which we are working, though I need to say that some of these points have already been mentioned by other speakers. I think Lini in our introductory remarks highlighted some of this, so I won't spend much time on this. Maybe the only thing I could add is on the structure of the global agriculture sector. Unlike other sectors such as energy and transport, the agriculture sector comprises hundreds of millions of small emitters that in aggregate add up to a sizable proportion of global GHG emissions. It is estimated that there are about 570 million farms worldwide, and 5 million of these are of size less than 2 hectares. And what this means is that GHG emissions from agriculture comes from several small and medium farms. The implications of this is that for any interventions to work, we need to work with each and every farmer. Unlike other sectors, such as transport, where interventions, you could only target, say, big manufacturers, in agriculture, every farmer's efforts count. I won't talk much about the political climate and political action with respect to agriculture, because that has already been mentioned. Maybe the only thing I could say is that whilst the number of countries have agriculture in their NDCs, some of the reports that have been generated, especially through the FAO, show that a larger proportion of contributions from the countries that relate to GHG emissions, there is only a small portion that have actions that explain how those targets are going to be achieved. Next slide, please. On my next slide, I will just talk about the challenges, and these have already been mentioned by colleagues. I think colleagues from Nigeria talked about the scarcity of capability and capacity in many parts of the world, and also highlighted to the issues of data. So maybe the only thing I would just highlight on that or re-emphasize on that is that there are significant quantification challenges in many places, and also a paucity of capability and capacities in terms of agriculture competencies. Next slide, please. Yeah, now getting to the GRI strategy. This is simply a framework of GRI-supported action in Africa. It outlines specific actions that New Zealand, through the GRI and in collaboration with its partners, will undertake to contribute to countries' capacity to move towards the sustainable development of their livestock sector, and to countries meeting their reporting obligation under the UNFCCC. The GRI Africa strategy has a number of components, as you can see from the figure on the left, but it is organized under 4 interlinked components that will be undertaken in parallel. The key components include capacity and capability development, development of measurement hubs, collaborative research, and investment in partnership. I will explain these a little bit further as we go. In terms of capacity development, this component will just focuses on the development of pipeline, development of a pipeline of early career scientists through a range of mechanisms. For example, in Africa, we have partnered with a number of organizations, including the RU Forum, which is a network of over 135 universities, to just support capacity needs of African countries with respect to agriculture and GHG research. With respect to the second component on the regional measurement hubs, we have proposed to work with established infrastructure and programs and to identify opportunities where additional resources would make a significant contribution to the development of regional capability to quantify GHGs from agriculture. I'm sure you will agree with me that you cannot mitigate what you cannot measure, and hence the need for infrastructure to facilitate measurement. And there is clearly a paucity of research infrastructure in Africa, and that's one area where we want to focus on. There is also need for collaborative research, robust assessment of possible reductions in GHG emissions associated with existing and planned agriculture development programs are able to provide us an opportunity to demonstrate progress towards fulfilling our in-country and global commitments, including NDCs. And they could also help us to make significant contributions to the implementation of global agreements such as the Paris Agreement. So specifically within the GRI, particularly under its livestock research group, we want to focus on management of agriculture sector GHG inventories, collecting and data. I think data is a key area where a lot of countries are lagging behind, and then also preparation of enhanced NDCs. Next slide, please.
Akim, if you could finish up quickly, we're running out of time. Thank
Great. You. Yep. I think I'll just skip that slide and just go to the next one to highlight some of the progress that we have made in advancing these in Africa. We currently have 3 awards and scholarship programs running, the Cliff Grads, which so far we have trained close to over 124 PhD students, and currently we are running the Ruforum Award grant system with the network of universities that I earlier mentioned. Then the next thing that we are focusing on, highlighted on my last slide, we've been partnering with a farmer institution, a farmer organization. Like I said, in this field, we need to work with every farmer. And we are also increasing understanding of currently available and collected in-country activity data for Tier 2 estimates of livestock emissions. And this is a project including or involving 39 sub-Saharan African countries. And lastly, we have been trying to get more members organized. These are in-country partnerships and just having more people participate in the GRI research groups. I'm going to end there and just invite you to contact me for the GRI Secretariat for any further information. Thank you very much. I'll end there.
Excellent. Thank you, Akim. And now I'm pleased to introduce Wynne Ellis, the Executive Director of the Sustainable Rice Platform.
Thank you very much. Good day, everybody. It's an honor to be here, and thank you again, CCAC, Linny, Catalina, for the invitation to be here. I was asked to provide a short briefing on the Sustainable Rice Platform, its goals and how it operates, and how it might be relevant to the West African context. And some previous speakers have already mentioned the SRP in their presentations. Next slide, please. Linny has contextualized it well in her introduction. We've heard a lot of discussion today about technologies and impacts, and I'm going to be talking instead about the institutional context and how we can take best practice and scale it up to essentially transform the global rice sector. So let's start with the problem statement and the observation, I suppose, that rice presents us with not one but two paradoxes. While providing a cheap, dependable source of food for half the world's population, it also has the largest carbon footprint of all food crops, as we know. At its current size, rice has a CO2 equivalent to the country of Germany, or the entire global aviation industry, pre-COVID anyway. So by whatever metric you choose, as you see in the slide here, the sustainability impact of rice dwarfs those of all the high-profile commodities that have attracted global attention from both business and the international development community over the past 20 years. And it's amazing that rice has actually come to the fore only recently in the sustainability debate. Next slide, please. When we talk about consumption, the challenge, it seems, from the projections of the Asian Development Bank and OECD and FAO as well, by and large, if you triangulate these projections, it looks like we're going to need at least 25% more rice to meet projected future global demand, whilst minimizing the sustainability footprint. And that also takes into account reducing per capita consumption as well as diets shift. Next slide, please. However, next slide, please. Against that backdrop, in Africa, where we have witnessed over the past 5 years the world's most rapid growth in rice production, in consumption, and imports, we also see a massive incidence of water scarcity and projections of much worse to come. So in Africa, especially, sustainable best practice in rice-based farming systems has to be a top policy consideration, as well as within the international development community. And indeed, I think the tone of the presentations I've heard today indicates that this is very much climbing up on the agenda, because, of course, the water agenda is so inextricably linked to the climate change conversation too. So, next slide, please. The Sustainable Rice Platform, with this challenge in mind, was conceived in 2011, actually, by UNEP and IRRI, along with some private sector partners. GIZ was also involved, to address this rice paradox. Why was rice so neglected in the sustainability stakes? How could we provide a framework for increasing production in a sustainable way? It grew from a small group of about 12 organizations, and this was before I joined actually, to its current size. We now have about just over 100 global public, private, and civil society organizations. And, we have this aim to really transform the global rice sector through a number of different types of intervention. Next slide, please. So we work basically, to boost livelihoods of rice smallholders, to reduce the water and climate change footprints of rice, to foster new market linkages for sustainable rice, and also provide entry points to contribute to sustainable development goals. And this is particularly obvious. We're hosted within UNEP, and you can see a lot of components in the program of work within UNEP have linkages to where rice could really contribute, and we've seen discussions about how agriculture has only recently entered the conversation in discussions of NDCs. We've also focused in the past on Asia and South and Southeast Asia, as being, the main producers of rice. We are now really turning our attention much more to Africa, and there have been a number of developments institutionally. ECOWAS is involved, the World Bank is involved, as we know. Islamic Development Bank has some major interventions in sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. Okay, sorry, could you go back one? I need to say a little more about that last slide. Yeah, so the ways we work, how do we drive this transformation? Well, we do it. First thing we did was to develop normative tools, and this is the standard and performance indicators. Akib said it well just now. He said you can't mitigate what you can't measure. So we provide basically an agreed working definition of sustainability in the rice in rice farming, and a means of measuring it and monitoring the impacts that can be then linked to SDGs. In the private sector, in fact, we're just about to launch our SRP verified assurance scheme, which will bring sustainable rice to supermarket shelves initially in Europe, but hopefully in Asia as well, where we see much more likelihood of actual retailer premiums being applied. Thirdly, we work through scaling projects, bilaterals and multilaterals. You can see the alphabet soup there. I'll say a little bit more about a larger scale consortium that we have set up, again, as a means of driving the SRP agenda, through the influence of these larger scale organizations, international organizations. Okay, we're also part of the UNEP Sustainable Food Systems Task Force, which takes us into the intergovernmental conversation. Next slide, please. So, what do we see as impacts? We've tested the standard implementation in a number of different countries. IRI analyzed this work in 2017, and what was interesting was, whilst there was, these are not robust longitudinal studies, but what struck me was that everything was pointing in the same direction. We were achieving similar kinds of results in all these different cultural contexts. So significant reduction in emissions in flooded rice systems, savings in water use and pumping costs, reductions in chemical use, and overall then increases in farmer incomes. We're not claiming here, we didn't see increases in yields, although this has been claimed by some of our partners. I think it's probable this will happen, but we don't have the evidence yet. But you can see this is worth shooting for. So, what we'd like to see very much, and we would love to have your collaboration on this, is to do actually a lot more work on, developing the evidence base for implementation of sustainable best practice in rice. Next, please. I want to say a little bit more. Next slide. Yeah, a little bit more about the assurance scheme that we are just about to launch. This is very new and will actually be released next week to support our value chain partners. And having worked on the upstream end for 3-4 years to ensure that we have tools that support farmer livelihoods and make a significant difference in environmental and climate change metrics, we also now create the consumer demand and involve the downstream actors to ensure that kind of incentivizes long-term upstream change. So the scheme is managed in collaboration with Global Gap, who I think most of you will be familiar with. They manage a lot of different proprietary standards and have very robust governance structures to support the assurance claim. So it provides value chain transparency and also market differentiation. And this combination of public sector development interventions and private sector activities, we hope will help to drive to build traction and build support in a kind of broad-based way. Next, please. So, if we have these tools available, if we are working on the farm, if we are providing the definition, the normative tools, if we're building awareness among retailers, how do we drive this collective impact that we seek? Next slide, please. we really need to develop scaling initiatives in the public and the development arena. And here, I just wanted to highlight this initiative that we put together a couple of years ago. 6 organizations came together to develop proposals under GEF 7. It's a global impact program. We have already, through UNEP and FAO as the GEF implementing agencies, we have put in proposals in, I think, 5 or 6 countries and raised indicative grant funding of about $50 million. And these projects are now at the PPG stage. So they're in the design stage. We think this is a promising avenue to drive sectoral transformation because it involves government agencies. It requires the buy-in of government agencies. They all have SRP as the core theory of change within them. And so we're very excited about this. But the important thing about this initiative is that it takes SRP off away from just as a farm level initiative and takes it into the realm of systems thinking. And we start to talk about landscapes and how rice. You don't just talk about rice as a single commodity, but you talk about its role within the overall agro ecosystem. And we're feeling our way. We don't have all the answers. We don't have landscape level indicators set up yet. So there's a wealth of opportunity, I think, for research in all of this. Yeah, and last slide, please. Next slide, which is the last slide. I hope this has given you a brief snapshot of the Sustainable Rice Platform. We are increasingly turning our focus to Africa, as I mentioned, and are very excited at the interest and engagement that we've seen at country and regional level so far. I would shout out to Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire, which are going to become members, as governmental members of SRP. Everyone is welcome. You just have to write to me. And we look forward to working with you both at policy and farm level. And we would love to hear from you if you have an interest in working on, research into impacts of adoption. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Win. So now we turn to our question and answer session. Please do put your questions into the question and answer box. The chat is also a possibility. So we have a fantastic question from Madeline Meyer saying, thank you very much. Many of the panelists mentioned issues related to developing bankable project proposals and the need to find funding for interventions. And she's asking, has anybody looked at the estimated funds needed versus the funds available? In other words, what's the funding gap? So that's a question for any of our panelists. And please just jump in, turn off your mic and hop in, even if you say no.
Hi, this is Win. We actually commissioned or worked together with the Earth Security Group last year to look at finance in the rice sector. What role could the financial community contribute to making this transformation? I can share the report of that with all of you. It was actually launched at COP25 in Madrid, and we are still working on questions relating to, well, how can we operationalize this, where you see a green bond market that is saturated for all kinds of commodities, but no one's investing in rice. So it's an opportunity for investors, but it's also an opportunity to actually make a difference for the financial community. I don't have an answer on the funding gap other than it is huge. But I think the blueprints that were offered in the ESG report might well be of interest in terms of structuring financial instruments such as bonds, trusts, and blended finance.
Thank you. And we can be sure to circulate that to the participants. Okay.
I'll send it to you right now.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment?
Yes, please. This is Akim. Not really to answer the question the way it was. It's a very intelligent and good question. But all I wanted to say is that within the agriculture sector, especially livestock sector, there is underinvestment. I would give an example. In 2017, there was about 180 billion dollars dispersed to developing countries, and only 0.1% of that went to agriculture. So clearly there is a gap and a paucity of investment in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions specifically to Lamine. The first is from Akiko Nagano, asking about what kind of compost, what was the material, how is it made, and by whom? And then also for Lamine, a question from, let's see, I can't tell who it's from, that is, can you come back to the agro-silvopastoral law for Senegal and how it can benefit the livestock sector? And very brief answers if possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Catalina, for and Mohammed for this question. As I have mentioned, in some countries like Senegal, we have both agriculture, forestry, and livestock sector that have to be managed in a comprehensive manner. And the sector is also rely to land use system, and sometimes land tenure is very important in the country because it is source of many problems. So to keep a very comprehensive development pathway in Senegal, we have worked in a very global law, and it is the law of a silvopastoral law, which is established to enhance the development in agriculture sector and to keep integration between agriculture, forestry, land use, and livestock. And the purpose is to reduce poverty, to ensure food security, but also to keep an environment of concertation about land tenure. And from this law, we have many action plans. One action plan for agricultural development, another action plan on forestry development, and one for livestock development. And from this livestock development plan, we have set up what we call the National Livestock Development Plan, PND, Plan National Development de l'Élevage, which now becomes the first component of livestock in the PSE, the Plan Senegal Emergent. So this situation, or this is an issue or a benefit of the first work done in the agro-silvopastoral development law. I don't know if I have given a very clear answer on that. And the second question is about compost use, if I have understood, Catalina.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. In our NDC, we have, if you see in mitigation action, mitigation area in Senegal NDC, you will not see the livestock area because it is very difficult with our social, traditional livestock systems to have mitigation actions. But in terms of methane emission in enteric fermentation, but we have one option in manure management by using biogas, biodigesters. And for a coherence purpose and to be aligned with the IPCC guidelines, this option is just shifted to energy sector. That's why you will not see it here. And when we are, when we will be implementing these biodigesters and biogas options, you will have the production of biogas, but also the production of manure, very important, high quality manure, and it will be used in agriculture. And in our NDC, this is a part of energy option, power option, which will be also having impact on agriculture by using this manure on market gardening systems, because they are very important in our farming systems. And to have also to see how farmers will be using many type of manure from organic matter to use what we call the compost systems, as per composters in French, and to improve the quality of the manure to be added in cropping, to reduce the use of chemical fertilizers. It is a way we are using for our NDC, because NDC is also integrated in what we call integrated environment integrity. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. We've run out of time. We will follow up with others of you who have asked questions separately after this meeting. I just want to really thank all of our panelists and also the audience for attending. It's been a very information-rich conversation, especially to help us understand the synergies between technology and research. We're clearly on the road to put and to achieving climate action. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much to everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.